So we leave Rasa will keep coming to haunt us at some point of time, definitely, but we leave it aside and just maybe ponder over it, because it's a very interesting thing to ponder over. Just keep it in our own mind, whatever kind of experiences we have. While Rasa may be categorized into 8 emotions and 8 possibilities, but the whole spirit of what it means to abstract something and be in a dispassionate sense still experience. I think that itself is a fascinating world, which is why whether it's climbing or whether it's visual art, we explore that very important human possibility. So the Devadasi. One is there are a lot of scholars who have done some incredible work on them, so I have to thank them before I even present this. Many scholars. I mean, this is my own notes. These are all my own notes from various places that I've picked up. There are many scholars who have done incredible work on the history of Devadasis from every. Most of the work has been up to about, say, the 17th, 16th century. There's Dr. Sita, who has worked on the music of Tanjavur, in which the stories of Devadasis come. There is Saskia, who's worked. There are many people who have worked. So from India and different parts of the world too. So I'm speaking about the Devadasi specifically, say, in the South Indian context. Now, one of the important things is many people say Devadasi equals the Tawaif. The Tawaif is the North Indian Mughal era word for the courtesan. Now, is the Devadasi the courtesan? There's always been an interesting debate about that among scholastic people. While there have been Devadasis who've been attached to purely the courts, when we say Devadasi, and some of them call them Rajadasis, for example, they are only the ones attached to the courts, but they have been the whole idea of the Devadasi and her role in the temple, the role of the woman in the temple, and the symbolism of the power of the woman, and especially in the case of the Devadasi, she is unmarried, she is considered married to the Lord, the idea of chastity, the power of that kind of a sexual power of the woman, all plays a very important role in the religious symbolism that she represents vis-a-vis the temple. Of course, the socio-politics of this also exists, but I'm just placing that. So, she is not exactly equal to the Tawaif. Okay, she's not. Just a culturally very different thing. So, I'm just going to look at few old Tamil things, and then come to places where we know there were courtesans and there were Devadasis and Rajadasis. So in Sangam literature, by the way, is BC, around 300 years or so, 400 years. These dates are always iffy because people keep shifting it this way or that way. If you're fanatical about Tamil, you will say my BC 1500 if you want another 100. You never know. But as far as my knowledge goes, about 300, 400 BC. All the Tolkappiyam is considered about 300 BC, I think, 200 BC. Some people say no, it's a little later. So this argument goes this way, that way. They say no, it's only early Common Era, etc. So whatever the time frame, you can do the referencing yourself. I'm not going to correct. Yeah, 2000 I think can be safely said. This is the whole idea of the Agam and the Puram, which is very interesting. All old Sangam literature is kind of divided into these two ideas, Agam and the Puram. So the idea of the Agam is like the inner, okay? So poetry that comes, or poetry, prose writings that comes with the idea of the inner, and in the inner is the idea of love, sexuality, attraction, tenderness, chastity, infatuation, and all these things come into the idea of the Agam, the inner, okay? And in this also there is a very clear dealing with the idea that the Agam is very powerful. It is very powerful, and it is something that can actually overwhelm our functionalities. Okay, so Agam is the inner, and usually Agam and Puram are generally written in the context of the king or the context of the leader, the powerful, okay, the poetry. So it could be any context of the village or thing, but you have the Agam and the Puram. The Puram is just the opposite. The Puram is the outer, the overt. So the valor, war, bravery, victory, honor, a certain, I would say a certain machismo that's very attached to the idea of the Puram. And there also it's a question of a different kind of an overt physical power, whereas the Agam is taken as internal power. Now, both these things are not just about the fact that they are the inner or the outer, but the whole fact that life in a way is a kind of a balancing battle between the two. You could very literally, if you want, make the Agam feminine and make the Puram masculine, but maybe that is too a simplistic way of looking at it, rather than say this is always the poetry and the writing look at both as being battlegrounds in the human being, the inner and the outer, and the whole battle between how does one stabilize the two, how does one hold the two. And the Agam is considered extremely powerful, okay, extremely powerful. So I think one of the, and that's where the woman, the chastity, the power of sexuality, the power of chastity, purity, this kind of notions are also coming in. One example of it, like one scholar very nicely says, is the whole story of Kannagi. You do know that I think she chops off her breast, or she removes her breast, and she curses the city. And everybody but cows, chaste women are all destroyed, right? This whole power, that whole is also symbolism of a certain power of the woman, of chastity, of sexuality that is there in the Agam. So you have a lot of poetry that deals with the Agam, a lot of poetry and writing that deals with the Puram. Both these are important to understand, because both these have been written to a large extent in the context of the leader. So you could have the leader's own internal struggles with love and infatuation and all that. You could have their own victory symbols, they're going into war, and some gory details. Yeah. I was just going to come to that. No, the kings never wrote. They were lazy fellows. They always had people to do things.
I lost the segue between Devdasi and Sanam.
I'm just coming there. I'm going to link it now. I have not. So, there were bards always who were writing these things. So, they were always poets, dance, and it was not only being written as prose, probably sung, there was music, there was celebrating the valor of the king, the defeating all the defeat that he did, or victory, celebrating the sexuality that was happening, the certain inner power that was happening, the women that they were, the whole love romances, all these were done by bards. These bards were men and women. Okay? These bards, I mean, for example, there's two interesting things that I read was the word urai, Tamil word urai, which people who know Tamil knows urai means to speak, to tell. Urai. Also means, by the way, fame, honor. So in a way, the bard's job to tell is very connected to the idea of fame. Similarly, isai, which means music, also means glory and fame and etc. So the job of the music and the urai, to say and to sing, was also to celebrate and to, and kind of, so the bard's job was very clear. You had both men and women as bards discussing this whole battleground between the inner and the outer, between valor, the victory, and the inner struggles of love and romance. And so using the king or the leader or the powerful as a term, you had women poets also, who I think were known at that time as Viralis and Patinis, who were female, who were doing this. Now, were these Devadasis? That's a question to be raised. We don't know. But we at least know that in the inner circle of the kingdoms, there were women who were part of this whole tradition of music, dance, poetry. Virali and Patini were considered, that's the names given for the female bards. So they were part of that whole tradition of music, dance, poetry. Now, were they the Devadasis in terms of temple context? I don't think so. But the whole tradition of having women, and the men used to apparently travel with the kings to the different places. The women were probably back in the cities or the towns. So what I'm trying to say here is that this whole tradition of these people being part of the musical and the poetic is there. It's very important that this tradition has been around the world also in many places, where you have had these women who are exemplary in music and dance and poetry and who are part of high class, high art. And I think that tradition seems to have been there, at least in the Sangam period. But again, we don't know. Now, in Selapati Garam, you have Madhavi, the character Madhavi. Now, Madhavi is high art, as high as it gets. She's a courtesan, is the English word I'm using because I didn't have a choice. Brilliant dancer, very, very attached to the powers. So you do have this idea of a certain group of women being artists, being culturally very awakened, culturally very superior in social structures, which is there. At this, I'll come back to the other thing a little later. But I want to say that this idea of the Devadasi, maybe I'll do it now, is not necessarily an high art thing. This idea of the Devadasi exists in many villages, even today. The idea of the woman being a certain conduit to the Lord. I've not even come to that in Sangam poetry, but conduit to the Lord, or attached to a catalyst for all the good things to happen. There are horrific things happening even today in villages because women are being used in that fashion. I think I'd come briefly for one of the lectures to Geeta Jaira's lecture, in which I spoke about a community called the Jogapas. I don't know if you remember, I'll just talk about it now. Jogapas are a transgender community living between the Karnataka, the Karnataka, Telangana and Maharashtra belt. Okay? They also consider themselves, they have a whole mythology on how they became transgenders, which goes back to Parashurama and etc., etc., etc. But also there is a whole Devadasi tradition that is part of their culture. That they are in a way married to the Lord, and they have this whole thing. And of course, there's a lot of abuse and there's prostitution, there's horrible things happening. But I'm saying that these cultures are there everywhere. These cultures are being there even today in many, many villages, in many towns where you have this. So it's not necessarily something that is attached to high courts or higher class. I think it is there culturally attached to many, many layers of society. The first time in history that we hear of a girl serving a temple, till now even in Agamanpuram I never spoke about the temple. See, there is this whole other thing that comes into being here is Tamil culture or Dravidian versus Aryan. I'm not going to get into that battle. Let me straight tell you now. I'm not going to get into that battle of Dravidian versus Aryan. Was there an invasion? This is kind of a crazy discussion that happens. But one thing is we can very clearly say, there is a huge shift, literally in terms of literature, in terms of art, between what you read and grasp in the earlier parts of, say, 2nd century and what you have in 8th, 9th century. In that period, there is definitely a cultural intermingling of what could be called Sanskrit traditions vis-a-vis Tamil traditions. I think that is something there's very little argument about. Now, how this happened, I'm not going to battle, okay? Because if you look at the inscriptions in a mountain called Kudmiyan Malai, which is there near Pudukkottai, where you have Sanskrit notations for songs. So that's around the 6th century. So by the 6th century, Sanskrit as a language is found on rock. I think the 6th to 7th century, on rock. Similarly, the whole intermingling of language, if you take the Tamil that you see in what you hear as the Divya Prabandhams or the later 8th and 9th century, you can see Sanskrit words there in it, very much actively in it. So there is, Pallava inscription at the same time, 6th, 7th century, same time, that's what I'm saying. So this whole question about this intermingling, this cultural confluence, one important thing I think we've all agreed through the world is when cultures meet, some fascinating things happen. I think America is a great example for that, of diverse cultures coming onto one place and creating a certain melting pot of possibilities. I think possibly similar things probably happened around the same period. Another thing, religiously remember that this was primarily Jaina and Buddhism that were the religions between until at least the 5th, 6th century, 7th century. Okay? It's only after that that the whole revivalist Hindu revival happened. Okay? So there is a certain rekindling that has also happened at that time. The Bhakti movement, which was a strong movement that also started around the 9th century, little later, also started as, and Bhakti movement without doubt was a counteraction to high caste intellectualism, without any doubt. It was appropriated later, but that's a different thing altogether. But it was a counter movement that was happening. So I'm just placing all this in the context of the Devadasi becoming a powerful tool from that time. In Manika Vachakar, who was 9th century, you find the first mention of a girl serving in a temple, and a young girl as being attached to a temple. So, yeah, there is worship, but a lot of the worship, at least no, in the early part of the Sangam period, there is no temple. Even in Silappatikaram, I don't think there is in this sense that as we understand temple, I don't think there is any direct mention. First of all, Silappatikaram is very Jaina. Silappatikaram is by Ilango Adigalal, who is Jaina. But there was no direct mention of temple as we know it today. See, there is a whole thing, no, the lot of that has also happened. If you take a lot of the folklores that are there in Tamil culture, that intermingles with a lot of Sanskritic traditions, that kind of becomes one body by itself. There are reinterpretations that happen to certain stories, symbolisms. Now, the worship of rock can become the worship of a linga. That's a fascinating transference of worshipping the stones have happened in every civilization around the globe. Rocks have always been worshipped, right? But then how does the rock become a linga? That's also a certain intermingling of cultures, of cultural possibilities. And of course, there are battles also there. There is, again, I say there's a reawakening happening. There's a fight against the Jaina happening, against against Buddhism happening. So all these are part. So in this, it's curious to wonder whether the becoming of this Devadasi as an important ritual element of a temple, on how that also happened around the same time. How that is connected, I don't know, but it's interesting to see that it's around the same time that you see the woman becoming an important catalyst to the Lord in the temple. And Manika Vachakar seems to be the first person mentioning it, of a young girl. In the Chola period, we know for certain there were hundreds of women across temples who were attached to the temples as Devadasis. We know that from inscriptions, land being donated to them, gold being given to them, they donating land to temples. So they were, again, high class, high art. So you find a lot of that. And then in my own, I remember just going and spending some time in Tanjavur, and I found some very interesting things. Yes. So I'm just going to read out some parts of this. This is my book. So sometimes you forget what you've written, so it's better to mark it. So I forget most of it actually. So it's very interesting. I'll just read some parts, music related, but it's connected here. We cannot tell from Chola temple iconography and religious texts just how these musical instruments and presentations were divided on the basis of music type and music hierarchy. Now that's important. So you find in Chola, a lot of these sculptures, women playing every instrument. Every instrument, orchestras of only women in Chola in temples, okay? Now the question is, what music did they play? We don't know. So this whole idea of high art and low art, we cannot exactly put our finger on. So when was it played? Was it played, this kind of music played during this occasion? Was there a hierarchy of certain Devadasis only playing certain kind of music, other Devadasis playing? We don't know. But one thing we can be clear, the whole idea that women were attached to the temple, they were performing ritual roles in the temple, they were also performing dance during rituals in the temple, is something that is actively possible during the Chola period. There's also the other, this is a little later, I'll come to that. So so you find Devadasis have made donations, they've got money, obviously there's some story of they being transferred from one temple to another, all these things, almost like IAS officers today. So, but anyway, And here I want to introduce the word which is in abuse today, Tevadiyal. I don't know how many of you here know Tamil. Tevadiyal means bastard. Yeah, right? Am I wrong or am I right? Tevadiyal is bastard, right? Anybody who knows Tamil here? Whore, right? But you use that as when you say, yeah, in that sense, yeah. Tevadiyal actually means, Tevadiyal Paya usually says you're a bastard. Tevadiyal Paya is you're a bastard. Now actually, it's, you know what the word is? Exactly. The word is Tevar Adiyal, which means the person who has surrendered. You could use the word servant, but actually the person who has surrendered to the Lord. The word Tevar Adiyal has become Tevadiyal today. That's of course political, socio-politics of the late 19th and early 20th century that happened. But the Tevar Adiyal is actually her name. As a person who has surrendered to the Lord. These women were not married. Okay, these women were considered married to the Lord. So there's a ceremony through which they go through that. Of course, there's a lot of rituals attached to it. And again, I think it is only during this period that you first find that word appearing. The idea. So we could say it is during the Chola period that the identity of the Devadasi, as we use it now, or Devadasi itself comes from the idea of Tevar Adiyal, comes only from the Chola period. And Chola period I'm talking about is about 1000 AD. Between the 11th century is around the time. That's a very important time also because that's when the Brihadishwara temple is made, built. All the great Tanjore temples around Tanjore are built around the same time. The Tevaram tradition, in fact, begins pretty much at that. Those who don't know, the Tevarams are supposed to have been lost for 200 years. And Rajaraja Chola, found it and then found tunes for it through an old lady. And he is the one who appointed people to sing the Tevarams in all the temple and called them Odwars. So you must, all this again reiterates about how traditions are recreated. The idea of continuity itself is a bit of a falsity. What actually happens is they are recreated. And it's in the recreation that we create continuity. That's what constantly seems to happen everywhere. So, sorry? That is supposed to be, see, that has always been the problem, no, in South India. I think they say that the, again, this is memory, I think it's called the Kalabra or something. Yeah, it looks like that period is a dark period, dark ages. That are very, very highly probable. But the only thing, only hitch over there is that it's not, they're not mentioned during the Pallava period also much. We have a lot of inscriptions, at least we have a lot of thing to go by in Kanchipuram and all that. In the Pallava period also, and you have a lot of stories, no? The whole story of the Jaina conversion happens from the Pallava period itself. Yeah, so no. See, Pallava period there are enough. Pallava period there is enough information also from the Tevarams. See, the Tevarams are already in the Pallava period itself. Tevarams are not Chola period. The rediscovery of the Tevarams is Chola period. Please remember. No. Manika Varchakar does. So 9th century there is. So maybe that is a late Pallava period. Okay, late Pallava period. So 9th century is 800 something. So that time you have. It's like you said, it's quite possible that they were already there in temples attached during that so-called dark age or whatever. And we don't know. It's definitely a probability. We don't know. And maybe we'll get more information.
In Sanskrit drama, the Devadasis are mentioned.
Which dramas? Kalidasas?
No, I don't know.
That may be later, maybe, I don't know. Maybe they are, but that must be the same period. I think they will all be overlapping around the same 9th century, 10th century period. Because I don't think, see, the idea of courtesans being in courts is there always. That is there even in Sangam period, that is there in Kalidasa, that is there everywhere. But this idea of the temple, that is a totally different thing. That is what we are talking about. That seems to be something that's more happened towards the late end of the first 10th century. Yes. But we don't know how, it is not. But I'm only sticking to this because I have not researched much on that belt. So I don't know. So this continues definitely. The Devadasis become an integral part. And in Chola period, you find some mentions which are very interesting, which are still there even up to the 19th century. So some rituals about carrying the pot. I know there's some water carrying rituals that are there. They were part of. There's a certain purity of what we call muddy. I don't know, achar muddy. Muddy is a kind of purification thing, right? That kind of thing seems to have been in the 19th century. And similar things I think are mentioned, not about muddy, but this idea of pot carrying rituals. Then there is some traditions which may have later also transformed to dance traditions. They had dance traditions even then. There's something called the Navasandhi Kautuvam, which we hear about, even Navasandhi Kautuvam, which is actually a Navasandhi 9 corners, right? 9. So there's some kind of a dance ritual. Navasandhi Kautuvam is found even in the 19th century, sorry. Something similar to that may have seems to have been happening even during the Chola period. So their whole, the interesting thing about them is they were, as a ritual, as a catalyst, they were not just being symbolic as bodies, but they were also, there was an artistry being built into the ritualism. There's a certain dance coming into the ritualism. That leads another question which I'll come to later. This goes on, okay? Some scholars believe that during the Chola period, there was a division between the courtesans of the temple, courtesans of the court, and the Devadasis of the temple, that there was no crossover. Some scholars feel that way. One thing is clear, towards the later end of 19th, I think there was a lot of interchanging happening.